all together because I think they're doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, that looks dangerous.
If it moves, I'm running out.
But, you know, famous for The Hills Have Eyes, and Lords of Salem, and Evil Within, and The Guyver, and I could go on and on, The X-Files, and you are literally omnipresent and everywhere.
I'm old.
I just turned 71.
Seriously, yeah.
Woo! And I don't smoke cigarettes.
Here Canada's 420, God bless you.
That's true.
That's true. It's medicine. Okay.
So growing up, I've read that you were a fan of classic monster movies to a certain extent, Vincent Price and Boris Karloff and a lot of the greats like that. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about some of the early films you watched as a young person that were horror or horror adjacent.
Absolutely. Is this a good, can you hear me good in the back?
Yes.
Great, because I will articulate precisely as necessary. When I was a kid, we had black and white television. We only had 13 channels. Grew up in Southern California. And my sister and I we watched all the classic Universal films. We had babysitters that would come over and stay with us until our parents came home to give us a whooping because we would do bad things. This one babysitter, I swear, she would always fall asleep, and then we'd be watching, you know, a scary movie, Frankenstein, any of the classics, Creature from the Black Lagoon. And then my sister would turn all the lights out in the entire house, and we had no remotes, so I would be by the TV, and you push the button, and the TV just goes boom, into a little pinpoint. Okay, now all the lights are off in the house. The babysitter does not like scary movies, and we did. And then my sister would stand behind her with her hands icy cold from a bucket of ice. And you know what happens next? She would grab her from behind the neck, and she'd do this, and then I would hit the button on the TV, and it'd go, and then she would yell. My sister and I would then turn all the lights back on, and we did this more than once because we were not very smart. We thought we were clever because we took all the coat hangers, the wooden ones, and hid them in the yardsticks. Back in those days, kid, yeah, it happened. And then I realized that wire coat hangers will bend to the circumference of your hiney. So yeah, we kind of grew up on that because I just loved the richness. I remember the first time I saw the Wolfman, and he did that transformation, and I knew over time it took hours and hours to do that time-lapse photography. But there was something, not romantic, but romantic in the historical sense of storytelling. And you had the misunderstood character that things happen and they don't want him to go in that direction. I always thought the sympathetic character of the Wolfman and the Frankenstein monster, they really clicked with me. And so I just had an affinity to that type of storytelling with the allegory between like a tormented soul that it cannot alter the situation that they're stuck in. So then you root for them. And I always root for the monster. Even Godzilla, I cried when he died.
Yeah. This is just a personal observation, but it's funny that you mentioned the Wolfman because I was looking at the Hills Have Eyes poster, and there's something about your gaze and Lon Chaney's gaze from the Wolfman poster. There's something very similar about those posters. I'm not sure if it's the construction or the expression that you both have, but it's or your kind of yellowy eyes that are in the artwork anyway. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, just kind of looking at them. I don't know if that was a deliberate choice or something like that, but
It's still a good reference.
And you worked with, you know, very early in your career, you kind of came into movie making, I know, almost accidentally. And you worked with Milos Forman, basically your second film?
It was my second day.
Second day, yeah.
Yes.
And you know, working with an accomplished director like that so early in your career, I know you've spoken about how much you learned on the set of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Could you tell us about some of the specific things you learned from Milos and learned maybe from, you know, the other actors or even the crew just about how to
Yes,
make movies?
absolutely. I worked 127 days on Cuckoo's Nest. We filmed at Oregon State Hospital in Salem, Oregon. It was a real operating facility at the time. We took over an entire wing. Some of the patients were real patients that are in the film, the ones without the speaking lines. We had 2 weeks of rehearsal with camera and blocking. So I'd only worked 1 day prior for George Pal, and I always mention George Pal. Thank you, George, because George Pal gave me my break. I didn't want to be an actor, but he said one day, "Are you an actor?" And I go, "No, man, I'm going to homestead in Alaska. Why would I want to be an actor? I've been looked at my whole life. I look different." He says, "But you have the perfect face for Doc Savage." And I go, "Oh, I read those books." So I worked. I got a union card, and he always I promised him that I would always say, "George Pal discovered me." So there you go. Shout out to my buddy. So he had a casting director, and that's how I got to be in Cuckoo's Nest. I was going to leave LA and homestead. So I get a call. I meet Michael Douglas, Saul Zaentz, and everyone. We go to Oregon, and we have 2 weeks of rehearsals, 6 days a week, and we were doing blocking for the camera work and various scenes. And I started to understand how we'll do a master shot where all the action takes place. Then they change the lens and they come in tighter, do your close-up, your close-up, your close-up. And I started to see the pieces of the puzzle, how a film is constructed, and how you have options with different takes that you can mix and match, like in the director's cut or in the editing room. So this became very fascinating to me because I have a science background, and I might have had ADD or ACD or OCD or busy brain as a kid. Sort of mercurial, kind of like Pluto when he got angry, just out of control, going 100 miles an hour. Well, this gave me a chance to calm down and learn things. So I had a wonderful opportunity one day when I asked Milos Forman. I said, "Milos, I have a degree in art history," which I do. And I said, "This is a different medium, storytelling with pictures and camera. And you're turning dials, pushing buttons, and people are taking tape measures and doing all this stuff. I want to know why they're doing all this and how I can enhance my efforts to make a better film." He's puffing on his pipe, and he says, I follow him over to a Panavision camera, and he said, he positioned me in front of the camera, and he goes, "I want you to have a love affair with the glass." And he handed me a book on cinematography, which I devoured and studied immensely. So when you're working on a set, for instance, they take a tape measure right from the focal plane of the lens, the camera, and when they bring it out, I'll grab the end of it and I bring it right to my eye because that's where they want it. And then when they have the tape on the floor, or you go from one position to another, you want to know how to hit those marks without making it obvious. He also let me look through the eyepiece of the camera, and I got to pan it and you know, pull focus, and I just became immersed in the science of optics. And when we did Cuckoo's Nest, we also were one of the last films that I'm aware of where they used carbon arc lighting. Back in the old days, during the World Wars, they have carbon rods that are actually ignited, and they feed until they run out, and then they flicker. It's really bright, and so if the light's on you, it's like, you know, you're trying to act like everything's normal, and half your face is melting, and you don't want to look at it, and so it was just so much knowledge. It was fantastic. We actually had some patients working with us, with the lighting department. As a matter of fact, in Cuckoo's Nest, there's a picture when they go to get electroshock. There is a picture, there's a scene where this young boy, maybe in his 20s, is looking through the window of the door with the little diamond-shaped wires. We had to spend an hour a day with real patients for the first 2 weeks to get to know what it was like to live in a mental hospital and what it was like on a day-to-day basis. We learned a lot about the humanity of what their lives were like, because we had to have that empathy to portray our characters. So, this one gentleman in particular is going to spend his entire life in a mental hospital because he was an arsonist. He burned a church to the ground and some people perished. So we had to get inside his brain, inside his head, and they were all working with us with permission to interview them and talk with them. And he sort of explained to me how his mind worked. And he was fascinated with fire. So where do you think he volunteered for? To put on a snowmobile suit, be outside the windows at the Oregon State Hospital in a blizzard while we're filming Cuckoo's Nest and helping them move the lights and help make these lights function, because inside there was intense fire. I mean, carbon is on fire, that's how intense they were. So they kind of respected his condition and also gave him an opportunity to use his mental capabilities to be part of the team. So it became an extended family. And I did learn from Cuckoo's Nest technical skills, but I also remember how small and less can be huge. And I'll finish this segment with the following. I'm going to mimic Jack Nicholson. At the end of the movie, Jack Nicholson is sitting with the chief on the floor. They've already opened the window. And every night around midnight, the train would go by and it'd blow its whistle. And there's a beautiful scene when Billy's having his date, and Jack is sitting next to the chief, and he goes, this won't take long, it'll be a short date. You know what I mean, Chief? Yeah. And he kind of blinks his eyes a little bit like he's tired, because he's planning on leaving and escaping. And he's done everything he can do to help bring humanity and joy into the ward, because most of us are volunteer. We're voluntary, we're not incarcerated. And the train blows its whistle. And I'm sitting right, just off camera right here looking at Jack Nicholson. I'm going, wow, Milos might go, cut. But he didn't, he kept the camera rolling. Next time you see the movie, remember this scene. Train. Jack Nicholson. Blinks his eyes, goes to sleep. Cut. You wake up, bam. Oh, here comes the orderlies, here comes the nurse. Oh my God, this tension's, but it's such a small scene and so subtle, but it's just packed with tension and subtlety. So I started to see how small is bigger. And there's a scene when Ellis gets the alcohol, and he wanted to convey that beyond even having a lobotomy, it wasn't the alcohol that made Ellis smile, a little subtle smile, which Milos wanted. It was the humanity and the camaraderie that was on the ward, that was brought to life from the spirit of McMurphy. And Louise Fletcher, by the way, had just finished up with a very difficult divorce. She had been out of the film industry for quite a while. And we were having dinner one night. She said, Michael, she said, I'm concerned that this movie is everyone's gonna think I'm a bitch. I'm a terrible person, and I'm not. And I said, I think we'll be fine. Of course, it won a lot of Oscars, and there was a wonderful moment when she received her Oscar where she didn't ask for permission. She just said a shout out and a thank you to her parents, by the way, who were mute, and she signed to them. So again, that reflected the family of everyone we worked together. Everyone on Cuckoo's Nest, including the crew, we became friends for life. That doesn't happen very often on a day-to-day basis. So I learned technical skills, I learned personal skills, I grew a lot, and I'm forever grateful.
I'm feeling emotional hearing you talk. To be honest, it's very close to my heart. I just wanted to touch on something you said in your conversation with Milos about the love affair with the glass, which is such a nice way of describing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really brilliant. I wonder how that applies when you're making horror movies. Like when you're making a genre movie, are you thinking this is a, this is a sci-fi exploitation movie, or this is a horror film, and do you approach it in a different way, or are you just kind of like, I'm doing my craft? Like, is there a different sort of approach that has to be taken?
Good question. I've had directors just say, "Go nuts, I'll capture you. Do whatever you want to do, I'll find it." Okay, that's kind of a loosey, goosey kind of approach, and I can appreciate that. But what I always like to do, if the director's in that realm, then that tells me that they're trusting what I'm going to give them. And we always do different takes, and then there's always adjustments, okay? And then some of the finer points sometimes are when you have a close-up, okay? That's when your face is as big as the wall, and you go, oh, clear still. Or I missed that hair, well, it happens. But I like a director that understands their camera and knows what they want frame-wise. If they don't give me camera lens framing, then I'll ask my DP, the guy behind the camera, I'll ask my cinematographer to give me guidance, because sometimes the director is more emotional, more dialogue, more arcs oriented than the structure of the frame, for instance. So I'll have them, I'll ask permission, and I'll look through the lens, so I can get my framing, especially if we pan. And there's also such things as little objects. Like when I studied art history or in composition, there's a lot of artists at these shows. I mean, go to the vendors, you'll see some cool work. The space between here and here, the space between here and here, all those little nuances make a difference. I started studying my face in the mirror. And I go, okay, if I do this, I get a little bit of white under my eyes. If I do this, it goes away. And all of those little subtleties are part of your arsenal, your crayons for your coloring book when you get to play. I even learned how to do this. Ask Motley Crue about that. They fell out of their chair laughing. So I like all kinds of directors, and it's always delightful when you give them a couple really killer choices to choose when you're editing.
And I know you worked on such a wide variety of movies over the years, and I really appreciate and respect how much you seem to work with newer directors and directors that have smaller budgets, and I think that is wonderful. And I wondered, you've probably developed a lot of patience for DIY, almost seat of your pants kind of filmmaking at times. And I wonder, is there anything that, and I sort of asked this on another panel yesterday, is there anything a director has asked you to do, regardless of budget, where you said, I can't do that?
Yes, absolutely. I was doing The Hills Have Eyes 2 with Wes Craven, and there is a scene where the camera is this much, and one of the motorcycle racer kids, his head is right here, and I'm supposed to kick him in the head, and his head's supposed to go out of frame. Well, he was kind of new. He didn't know framing very well. He couldn't figure out where the imaginary lines were. I said, well, look through the camera. He still couldn't figure it out. So the kid's getting frustrated, and here's what he says: "Oh, Michael, I have a thick skull. Just go ahead and kick me in the head." And I go, well, we're professionals, and that's a stunt. I says, I have a suggestion. He says, what's that? I go, well, when you feel my foot against your face, don't make it obvious, but make contact with my face, and make sure my foot is always touching your face. And I'll keep my knee slightly bent, and all I have to do is that, and then you just follow the action, and you're out of the scene. And he goes, that's a great idea. So that was a good suggestion. Now, there was all right, I'm a pretty straight-talking guy. I had a contract for a movie in Wisconsin, and I was supposed to be a very bad guy to a young lady who, and there's a young gentlemen in the room, so you grown-ups use your imagination. And I'm standing and she's kneeling and the camera's behind me. Use your imagination. And then the director wanted me to say some words, which I said no. And but I'm a bad guy, and then I get killed for being a bad guy. So I will not I will not harm an animal on camera. I will not be disrespectful to a woman beyond a certain point. And you have to be able to say no. So I had this director, we had a phone conversation with my manager, the director, and myself. And I said, I'm recording this conversation. And I said, I have a suggestion. How about, instead of me saying, come to daddy, which ain't gonna happen, I said, how about this? How about all I do is do a little tug and walk away. They wanted me to drop trout, and I said, I ain't doing that. And so I go, we're gonna do it this way. It's classier. The camera's behind me, I step aside, a little bit of tug on my belt, that's all you see. And then there's a devastated woman after the fact. And they go, oh, that's a great solution. So I fly to Wisconsin, I get home at night, around 11 o'clock. They're filming midnight to 8 in the morning. And as I'm on my way to the hotel, they say, oh, would you like to go visit the set? And I go, yes, I'd like to meet my actors and say hello to everybody and wish them a good night's shoot, and then we start up tomorrow. So they get me on the set, and what do you think they did? I meet the young lady, and they go, well, let's just shoot that scene now. And I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go in the other room and have a private conversation. You, me, the producer, director, cinematographer, and the young actress. So we went in the other room, I sat down, and I said, here's how I see doing this scene. And the young actress, she'd never worked on a film before, and I could see her eyes light up, and she goes, I really like that way of doing it. I go, yes, it's called acting. And then the director and producer go, well, we think you're being difficult. And I said, well, we have a 24-hour hotline with the Screen Actors Guild of America, and I can make a phone call right now and shut you down because you're in breach of contract. This is my travel day. I was supposed to be getting my beauty sleep right now at my hotel. So you dragged me out to the set, and as a courtesy, I wanted to say hi, hello, and let's knock this film out of the park to the cast and crew. And guess what? You're trying to make me work on my travel day, and you're also breaking our verbal contract. And the actress is going, huh? And then I took my tape recorder and I pushed play. The look on her face and everybody else was like, wow, okay. So they said, well, we're going to replace you. I said, okay. Then when I get on the plane, I should have a full paycheck in full, and I'm on the plane. So we did that, they did that, I fly home. Then one of the crew members called me up about a week later. I said, how'd it go? He said, oh, they took her out, wined her, dined her, promised her the moon, and they found someone to replace you, and they did it the other way. And I said, well, that's too bad. And the movie never made it anywhere. My point of saying this is, no matter what situation or zip code or situation you're in, if you don't call your own shots, somebody else will. So it's called being a professional. Now, being a professional can mean doing something terrible. There was a very famous singer, his name was Robert Goulet, back in your grandparents' days of Vegas. And a friend of mine made a little presentation video for a guy named Bob Stupak, who owns the Space Needle. He wanted to do a new casino. Casino was going to be the Titanic. The front of the casino would sink every night. And I was at a meeting with a friend of mine who made the presentation video to a bunch of billionaires, and we're in a room like this, and we're showing the video. It's terrible, and Robert Goulet is singing a terrible song. Now, Bob Stupak is also a composer, so he composed this really terrible song. Now, we're in the back watching people with their jaws, agape, going, I'm not investing in this, this is just crazy. And the song went kind of like this. So you're seeing a visual of Titanic, the front of the casino, facade sinking every night. And the song was like, she was a proud ship on her bow, it rose and it sank. It was horrible. And I'm going, Robert, and here's Robert Goulet standing right next to me. And I go, Robert, you're Robert Goulet. Why on earth did you do this? Robert Goulet said, I had a contract. I am a professional singer. He paid my fee. Yeah, so I had a good laugh over that. All right, next question. I digress.
I wanted to ask you about something else that was probably in your contract for The Hills Have Eyes and that I was not aware of until I started researching the movie's marketing campaign. And I know you've told the story before, but I don't know if you guys realized that when the movie was being shown in its early stages, Michael would accompany the screenings dressed in his full costume for the movie. So would you mind talking a little bit about that?
I would love to share this story.
Incredible.
We're somewhere back east with Peter Locke, our producer, Barry Kahn, our producer, Wes Craven, our director, and our guy. So I'm dressed up like Pluto. And we're doing a tour of the country, going to various theaters. And we're in the theater, and I'm sitting behind a young gentleman about your age, sir, and his mother, and right about the time when they say, kill the baby, the mother stands up and goes, this movie is sick and depraved. And she goes to leave, and she grabs her son by the arm, dragging him out, and he's watching the movie. And as she walks past me, I tap her on the shoulder, dressed as Pluto, and I go, you're damn right, lady! And she screamed, and she ran away. So I told the boy, I said, it's going to be fine, watch the rest of the movie, enjoy it, here's some popcorn, I want to go chill out with your mom. So I walk out into the lobby, and here's the mom. Why do you make movies like this? And I'm falling in. But really, it's just a scary story. It's based on the McBean family. I don't care. Back and forth, and back and forth. I go, really, I didn't mean to harm you. Yes, sir.
Also, it's actually based on a true story about like 100 years ago in the nighttime.
About 100 years ago, there was a family way back in the Northeast. It was called the McBean family.
They would eat people.
Yeah, and evidently the story is that urban legend that people would go hiking in the woods where they lived and they would never return. And when they did finally find them, there were human bones, and I guess they never went shopping.
Yeah, and their punishment was being whipped a lot of times.
Oh yeah, creepy stuff, man. Really creepy stuff.
Yeah.
So I started off being sarcastic to this poor woman, and she goes, "Why do you make movies like this?" I don't want to scare you, of course. and that did not calm her. And then I felt kind of bad about that. And I said, "Well, look, can I buy you a cup of coffee, anything?" And we finally sat down. And I said, "Look, I have pets. Here, there's a picture of them. They're living, breathing. I don't eat them. And I love babies. I'm an uncle." And she finally calmed down, and I said, "Look, we do bad things, but we get killed. We can still catch the part when the dog kills me, it tears my throat out. That'll make you feel any better." And she goes, "No, it's just," and then she says, "Well, I saw this movie once." And then we're sitting down, and I go, "Well, tell me about it." And she saw a scary movie, and it bothered her, and something happened in real life where, you know, she kind of put the two and two together. And I said, "Well, I'm so sorry." I says, "I think these movies have a situation where it can be cathartic." Come on. When I was your age, young man, I was in grammar school, and my desk, and if there was a nuclear bomb, that we would be protected, which is a lie. My father was a Navy surgeon attached to the 3rd Marines at the end of World War II, and he went to ground zero at Hiroshima. I have pictures I will never share with anybody. They're pictures of vaporized human beings embedded into a cement wall. I'm an activist for peace and humanity. I do not like war. I think wars can be avoided. And if anybody wants to start a war, you take the leader in this country and the leader in this country and you put them in a cage with a bunch of bricks and bats, and we sit home and watch popcorn and they go for it. You're not sending my sons and daughters to go fight for oil companies. Sorry, that's just my opinion.
I think on that note, I'm seeing some hands already going up. We have time probably for a question or two.
Questions, I love questions. Yes, sir.
Do you hope that they release The Crow with the Skull Cowboy?
Great question. You are a wise young man. Actually, they sort of did. There is a double disc DVD of The Crow, and there are some lighting tests that I did with Brandon Lee as the Skull Cowboy. I was really hoping after he got shot and we lost him, I had conversations with James O'Barr, who wrote the original story, and with my director and my producer, and we really wanted to have the Skull Cowboy be in the finished movie, because there's 3 confrontations where my character in the original story had been murdered along with his beloved, his fiancée. And I had the ability to kill the ones that killed us. But then I saw other people in need, you know, because there's bad people going on in the town, and then I created vengeance against them. But the rules were, kill the ones that killed you both, and then you will be reunited with your beloved. But when the Skull Cowboy in the original story saw people in need, he couldn't not help them. So that became a challenge. And those are the 3 times when I talk to Brandon Lee, and I tell him, this is how it has to be. And then of course, he wants to help Sarah and the others. So it would have been wonderful, but we would have had to have someone replace Brandon Lee where you see his face, and we would know that it wasn't him. I can only see the one original Crow. I know they did other ones. I like to see my brothers and sisters acting and working, but the movie was such a challenge to us all. It was he got shot the night before I was to fly out and be with him. David Scow, who wrote the screenplay, did a documentary, and he sent us all cast members copies of the footage of Brandon Lee's birthday party on the set, and some other wonderful footage. There's a beautiful, beautiful scene. Just think about cinematography. If you remember in the movie at night, and there's the trick-or-treaters running up the sidewalk, and they're passing Brandon Lee. The camera's behind him, and as he pulls focus, it's snowing. And a snowflake, when it's out of focus, creates kind of a wonderful, kind of a blur orb, so to speak. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful scene. And the movement of the trick-or-treaters is almost musical. It's melodic. It's like this. And then they go past Brandon Lee, and he turns around, and you can see his face, and he does a beautiful smile. It's probably one of the most charming moments of the film. And my favorite scene is when he's helping Sarah's mother. And he goes into the room, and he says, "Heroin is bad for you." And then the heroin comes out of her arm. And then she breaks down, and he says, probably some of the most beautiful words in cinema history. He says, "Mother is the name for God on the hearts and lips of all children. Go, your daughter needs you." And that was a local actress, and the emotion, and she does this beautiful, she tears up and leaves, but the intensity of all that emotion compressed into just a few seconds is the magic of what we do with the camera. And one of my biggest complaints with any film is, please, if you ever make a film, indie movie or whatever, invest in good microphones. Get the live dialogue from your actors, because they're in the emotional moment. It's like when in the Bruce Lee movie when he goes to Han's tournament, he's talking to the boy and it's his time for his karate lesson, and the British guy is trying to say, "Come on, we need you to do this special mission at Han's tournament." He goes, "It's Lao's time." And he's talking to the young boy and he says, "Kick me." And the kid's doing his kick, and Bruce Lee goes, "Not with anger, It's like pointing your finger to the moon. Don't focus on your finger, or you will miss out on all of that celestial glory. Again. Then the kid does it again, he does it really well, and Bruce Lee goes, how do you feel about that? And the kid goes, and then he slaps him on the head. But so there's just little moments that are just tremendous, and they're called gems, and it's really nice when you can capture that. But remember, live sound is the way you want to go. ADR is like, and don't film outside a big city where there's airplanes and dirt bikes. It'll ruin your budget.
And I think on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Michael.
But I don't want to go. I want to order pizza and hang out here. Why, certainly.